for. You're tuned in to Tapped Out, hosted by Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine, only on the BetQL network.
And a good Saturday evening, wherever you're checking us out here on the BetQL network. It is Tapped Out, produced by Jake Noaker, with my co-host Brendan Tobin, rocking his Florida Panthers hat as they go for the Cup tonight, the sweep for the Cup. I am merely the sports machine, Sean Levine. We'll get to a little bit of hockey later on as the
Excited,
show goes.
man. Exciting
Dude,
night.
I know you are. I know. And things are looking pretty good for you, and they're looking pretty good for my bet because I laid down a little bit of Panthers money for you, my boy, at the beginning of this series. But before we get to the ice, let's talk about the octagon. Actually, let's talk about a fight that we're not going to get, at least for now. Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Man, this one has been in the works for literally years. It's been, 2 years since Michael Chandler called out Conor McGregor a couple of years ago. Conor last fought Dustin Poirier, got his ankle all twisted up. We finally thought we were going to get the matchup. It's been delayed forever, talked about even longer. It was supposed to be in Las Vegas in less than a month at 3:03. And you could kind of tell, BT, that over the last week, it wasn't looking good for this fight, where first they canceled the press conference in Dublin. Then Conor came out with a kind of cryptic, I guess, post, if you will, not being real direct on what's going on. It kind of felt like the next thing was going to happen was Dana was going to come out and tell us the fight was canceled and then give us a new fight. Before we talk about the new fight and all that stuff, honestly, how surprised are you that we're having this conversation?
Yeah, not too surprised that we've gotten to the point. I guess the only thing that is a bummer about it is it happens so close to the fight. And I guess we probably could have gotten the news maybe a week earlier, but I'm sure Conor was doing everything that he could to get out there, and you got to give him, that respect, because I'm sure it's killing him that he wants to get back out there. 3 years since he's been in the octagon, but not too surprised, man. I mean, look, the underbelly of this entire story and comeback is his injury was really, really, really bad.
You've been saying that for a while.
Yeah, and we've had the recovery has not been good for anybody who's come back from it. Even you look at a guy like Chris Weidman, the first fight that he came back from it, not great. Anderson Silva never looked the same. And then you have Conor, who was kind of dealing with this whole PED recovery thing, had to dance around USADA. And, he seems like a guy who's definitely been going through some stuff to get himself back in the octagon, but it's just not an easy thing to recover from. And he's also not the youngest guy in the world either. So, not that surprised that we've ended up here. I guess a little disappointed that it's this close out from the fight day.
Are you surprised that we haven't gotten more details, though? Because the UFC has basically come out and said, we're going to still have this fight. They're going to try to basically move it back to August or September or something like that, get Conor in there with Michael Chandler. And frankly, it's in the octagon and made a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm not so surprised, dude, that we haven't gotten too many details. I'm sure there's been a lot of there's been a lot of talk and fodder about this possibly having something to do with the initial injury. I know there's some fodder out there from Michael Bisping that he heard from John McCarthy that this has to do with the leg injury. I don't know how legit that is, because it does. It is noticeable how secretive it is, because usually we get some kind of a detail. Some fighter gives an explanation as to why they're not going out there. The fact that we're not getting any details does worry me, because it makes me feel like, oh, there's something pretty serious here, or just very concerning to Conor.
The thing is, when injury, most of the time we can just say that's what's going on. We've got the injury, and we've got the whole maybe steroids thing, and we've got maybe a weight issue, and we've got always outside of the octagon issues with Conor McGregor. So that's what's a little bit cryptic about the whole thing is I assume that it's just an injury, the leg, that he still needs a little bit more time from recovery. Completely understandable. You've said this a lot. The last thing we want to do is rush back Conor McGregor. And you can understand also from the UFC's perspective, like, he's not getting any younger. He hasn't been winning a lot of fights recently. If he said he's healthy, you still have to strike while the iron's hot. So I'm not really blaming either side here. It does still feel like at some point, though, fingers crossed, we're going to end up getting this fight.
Yeah, honestly, I would say the people I feel worst for in this whole scenario, oddly, like Conor's not in that room, because I think Conor is doing the right thing by him. I think he should take whatever amount of time it needs for him to feel 110% to get back in there. I feel bad for the fans that paid to go out there, and
Brutal.
we're expecting a Conor McGregor. I know that I saw our boy Eric Richter saying a lot of people who bought secondary tickets can't get refunds for it. That's brutal. And then I feel bad for Michael Chandler, because, like, you're Michael Chandler. You're at this odd point in your career where you're trying to wait for red panty night. You're trying to wait for this big payday, and the can keeps getting kicked down. And I you got to wonder for his standpoint, like, how much does he want to continue to play the waiting game? I mean, it's got to have a breaking point at some point, not just from a money perspective, but just an activity standpoint, a stay busy fight, something like that. And I don't know, man. It's hard, because you want Conor to come back and look like Conor, and you want him to be at his fullest, but you really don't know what the right timeline is for that to happen. And so whatever it takes for him, I'm not blaming him. He could take as long as he wants, even if it is another 6 months. But the other party that's involved in this, the other side of this card, God, that's got to be brutal for Chandler.
Any chance it's the other way, that we don't ever?
I don't think, the idea that he goes out there and he tries to find some other opponent. No, I don't think that there's. I got to think Michael Chandler's going to probably put a cap on it by the end of the year. I think if you've waited this long, you prepared for this long, okay, go out there and get the job done against Conor McGregor. But I would say by the end of 24, Michael Chandler, if he still doesn't have any idea about if Conor McGregor's coming back, then he's got to start looking for other action. In this case, I guess we got some tech issues connecting with Sean, but look, this is a completely frustrating thing from a fan perspective too. Everybody's excited about it. We're all excited about it. Nobody moves the needle like Conor McGregor. Everybody gets in on it. Everybody wants to gamble about it. Everybody wants to have a take about it. Everybody wants to talk about it. He is the most captivating guy to ever step into the cage, and to not have him and just to keep, having things, pop up is just, it's disappointing from all parties' perspective. Even, from the fans' perspective, we're bummed about it as well.
So 303 now is basically a completely new card. The new main event. Tell me what this does for you. Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira. Obviously, these two guys are going to strike it out. That's going to be a great matchup. Right now, Pereira is just a slight favorite to win the fight. It's almost like cool under any other circumstances, but I want to see, it's like it's not Conor McGregor.
Yeah, what the thing that sucks is because Pereira is arguably having one of the great runs ever to start a UFC career.
His getting pretty legit. Is Sean Strickland and knocked out Izzy, and in his last fight, like Prochazka. I mean, yeah, dude, it's getting pretty legit.
I feel like people really love watching him fight, but you got to think about the circumstances of his last two announcements have been. He was the very tepid announcement of the main event for UFC 300, and we're all like, okay, cool. I mean, great. And then now he has to come in and save the Conor card. So, like, you feel a little bit bad for Pereira, too, because, like, gangster of him that he's stepping in on last minute to save these monster cards. But this guy feels like he should be almost having his own build-up for whatever big card and big announcement. And now, unfortunately, like, his last two, main events have been put under weird circumstances. But I like the fight. I mean, look, seems like an impossible fight that's not going to be great between two of them. Two excellent strikers. Guys go and they throw absolute hammers and home run shots. It feels like a pretty even fight. I lean Pereira just because he's had the run as of late, especially in this weight class, but it really could go either way.
So also Jamal Hill's out of 303 versus Carlos Ulberg. Anthony Lionheart Smith, friend of the show, is in that fight. My boy Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez also. So it's a completely new card. We'll get to some of that coming up in a little bit. The other big news in the UFC as far as guys pulling out of fights, Hamza Chimaev is out of his fight versus the Reaper, Robert Whitaker. I can't say I'm surprised. I think this is like the 6th time or something like that Khamzat was supposed to be in a particular fight and it didn't happen for whatever reason. They're talking about, it's kind of cryptic like we were talking about with McGregor. We don't really know, but it sounds like it's kind of serious. And this dude, for whatever reason, Chimaev, has dealt with all kinds of health issues. If you remember, he had COVID really messed him up for a long time. And then he was out for months and months with some other just bug that he couldn't deal with. And now they say that might force him to retire. Dude, this guy went from fighting everybody to never fighting. What a weird career.
Yeah, it's really, really unfortunate. You could argue right now these are the 2 most captivating guys in the sport right now, maybe save for O'Malley. And you really just it's just unfortunate because you mention it, like he's on Conor's part, it's been like his bones and limbs failing him. With with Chimaev, it feels like he just has some really bad reactions to illnesses, scary pictures of him in the hospital and whatnot, and you're just praying for him that he could pull through this. But yeah, this is a guy I think we all thought had the possibility to maybe be like the next Khabib, the next savage Russian who everybody feared. And his claim to fame that everybody fell in love with during the pandemic was, hey, fought days apart. He was fighting everybody, all comers, putting on sick finishes, and he just hasn't been able to get out of first gear since then. It's just one thing after another. And so between Conor and Khamzat, and hell, even throw John Jones in the mix, some of the biggest faces of the sport, it's just you don't know when they're going to come back. And that's the unfortunate thing. UFC is a machine, and they can still make some pretty good fights, but these guys undoubtedly are some of the biggest stars in the sport. And we really don't know if we're going to get them again, and if we do, what they're going to look like if we do.
That's the thing with Khamzat is when they say we might never see him again, a lot of times I feel like that's kind of fear-mongering and it's headlines. With Khamzat, how many times have we actually seen him fight in the last, let's call it, 2 years, 3 years since we've been doing the show? We talk about him all the time. And when he's in the octagon, he's a lot of fun to watch. He fought Usman. He fought Gilbert Burns. He fought Kevin Holland. Is that it in the last 3 years? That's the problem.
Yeah, those are
not only is it health, but inactivity. Even when he is healthy, if for whatever reason he did have to end up retiring or only has a few more fights, he's going to go down as one of the biggest has been, what could have been in the history of the promotion.
Yeah, and it's from a couple of perspectives too, because you don't know how much health has messed him up. Because I think we have, I think on this, at least from my side, I've definitely been a skeptic of like, I don't know what his greatness is. I think we can all see it, but we've been wondering, and now you just never know if he's ever going to fulfill that potential. That's just the unfortunate. And this was just, I mean, dude, this was an awesome fight. Him versus Robert Whitaker, clash of styles, perfect test for him. And to see that one, just come up empty is a gut punch. It had to be an unbelievably tough week at UFC headquarters to be dealing with this news and the Conor McGregor stuff.
Yeah, you could tell when Dana was announcing that the Chandler McGregor fight was off, he tried to put on a smile and talk about how excited he was for Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira. And again, that's a great fight, but it's just there's no way. It had to be a gut punch for Dana. Because that's his cash cow in Conor McGregor. And now in the back of his mind, he has to wonder, basically what I just asked you over the last few minutes is, if and when is Notorious going to be back? If and when is Chimaev going to be back? And to your point real quick, because you said you've been a skeptic about him, I think you should pat yourself on the back a little bit while he's still undefeated. I think it's fair to say he's not maybe as great or unbeatable as we once thought he was. Gilbert Burns gave him all he wanted versus we hadn't seen Usman in a long time. Usman was coming off 5 minutes notice, and he gave him a good fight too. Like, Chimaev's good, but I don't think he was ever great in the octagon. Really good.
Yeah, and look, I think the questions are fair, but I think, when you bring up the history of illness since COVID happened, when he really became a star, you do wonder, like, man, what kind of an effect did that have on him? Because, no, I mean, like, look, he looked in Fight Island like this guy's the most unstoppable thing we've ever seen in the cage. Like, he looked that good. I know that the competition maybe wasn't what it was, but it's wholly disappointing. And for the UFC's perspective, to lose guys of this stature and this fascination that we all like, we'll talk about any piece of news regarding them. They're those kind of captivating, obviously comes on a different level than Hamzat, but Hamzat's up there. Hamzat's definitely up there as one of the more fascinating names we talk about in the sport. So for him to be out too, just a gut punch week for the fans.
What do you give Tommy when he's sick? Isn't there like something you guys can give to him to make him feel better? Some sort of orange juice, or I don't know. I'm not a parent. There's got to be something you can give Chimaev. Coming up next, we'll talk Hamzat, we'll talk Connor, we'll talk Sean O'Malley, we'll talk more fighting with Dylan Napoleon from Cage Side Press right here, tapped out on the BetQL Network.